International Affairs, and it is a great pleasure actually to welcome to the first public seminar since almost 2 years because of the lockdown and the pandemic. And what a relief it is to see so many people without wearing a face mask. And we are, of course, particularly proud today to host the Foreign Minister of Greece, Mr. Nikolaos Dendias. Thank you so much for coming here. The speech by the Foreign Minister, or the remarks, will be followed by a conversation between him and Professor Tore Henriksen, the Dean at the Faculty of Law at the University of Tromsø. So welcome also to you, Tore. Let me also remind you that this seminar will be streamed and made available at our NUPI YouTube channel. And it's also possible to ask questions and participate in the exchange through the chat function in the stream. Now, Norwegians care a lot about the seas and also care a lot about the law of the seas. It's very important for our access and control of natural resources, for our shipping industry, maritime industry, and of course for the organized and rules-based international order. As such, the law of the sea is vital to Norwegian foreign policy and for Norwegian welfare, I must say. Our maritime space is huge, much bigger than our landmass, and also one of the most important, I would say, achievements in modern Norwegian foreign policy is the maritime delimitation agreement that we reached with Russia and signed in 2010 and ratified by both parties in August 2011. However, in the Eastern Mediterranean, there are perhaps even more difficulties than the small ones that we had with our Russian neighbors. Greece and Turkey, and you see it on the map there, share a long history of peace and war and tensions, contention over maritime zones in the Aegean Sea and the East Mediterranean has been at the core of this history for decades or centuries, for those who have read history of the region. It's about the delimitation of the territorial waters, of the exclusive economic zones, and increasingly also about the use of the continental shelf. The Eastern Mediterranean is an energy province that is becoming more important and dynamic. Fields have been developed by Israel, by Egypt, and of course Cyprus is in the midst of these problems. And as I understand it, some of the difficulties between Greece and Turkey and other countries have unsuccessfully been brought before the International Court of Justice. That's been discussed in the Security Council, has given rise to at least one delimitation agreement. So I'm not a legal expert, and you might hear that already. But as I see it, there are at least 4 big issues at stake. The first is, of course, the question of what entitlements islands and rocks have in the law of the sea, and perhaps more important, what their influence is in maritime delimitation. A second aspect relates to maritime zones, the width and reach in the territorial waters. And then, of course, there's the issue about sovereignty, and also the issue and status of some of the agreements on demilitarization. In addition to the legal difficulties and the legal interpretations, it's also about the process and the dynamics through which such issues are resolved. Of course, it's extremely important. In some sense, and I think we will hear that today, this is a legal issue, but there is also a political issue. And over time, tensions have sometimes between Turkey and Greece have been high during the last few years, and it's also concerning, I would say, that some of these difficulties arise between countries that are also in an alliance where we participate. So for many reasons, it's important to seek good solutions, to do so in a peaceful manner, and to ensure stable solutions. And in some sense, the law of the seas is an important and almost fundamental foundation for reaching those agreements. So on that note, I would like to give the floor to Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Dendias. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for taking the time in your busy schedule to give your remarks and views, and we look forward to having a good conversation that will last for around an hour. Thank you so much. Floor is yours.
Well, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Professor, first of all, I have to thank you for the invitation. It does me a great honor. And I have to say also as a personal experience after the 2 COVID years, it's a great pleasure to be on a seminar in which you don't face a screen, but you face people and you face questions. And well, Greece views the Eastern Mediterranean region as an area of stability and prosperity, where all countries, all people should be able to enjoy peace and security. A member of the European Union, a member of the NATO alliance, Greece actively promotes synergies and regional partnerships based on international law and the international law of the sea. But needless to say, within also the big framework of the United Nations Chapter. In this vein, my country had developed close ties with important partners of the region, extending from the Balkans to the Middle East, from North Africa to the Gulf. On the basis of a common understanding of the law of the sea, we're expanding this cooperation also with countries of the Indo-Pacific region. While advancing our bilateral relations to new heights, we have also pioneered multilateral formats of cooperation dealing with a wide variety of fields. In this way, we express the voice and fortify the efforts of all those who are committed to safeguarding peace, stability, and development. This is the Greek response to the many challenges in the Eastern Mediterranean and our wider neighborhood. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not bringing any news to you by saying that Greece is a traditional maritime nation. The Greek coastline of the mainland, together with the coastline of our islands, is almost 16,000 kilometers. It's approximately something like the coastline of Africa, a little less. And the Greek islands constitute approximately 1/3, a little less again, of the Greek national territory. My country is opposed to any threat or use of force in settling any dispute, and of course, maritime disputes. Greece is a state party to UNCLOS since 1995, and the universal character of UNCLOS is evidenced by the fact that 168 parties, including the European Union per se, are bound by its provisions. Greece has developed its policies and actions based on international law, and of course on international law of the sea. It is on this basis that we have concluded delimitation agreements with our neighborhoods. More specifically, Greece and Italy concluded in 2020 the agreement on the delimitation of their respective maritime zones. The delimitation line of this agreement follows the line agreed upon between the two countries in 1977 on the delimitation of their respective continental shelves. 2 months later, in August 2020, Greece and Egypt signed an agreement on the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone between our two countries. The agreement establishes a partial delimitation of the maritime boundaries. Finally, Greece has repeatedly stated its readiness to start or resume UNCLOS-based negotiation with other countries, aiming at concluding similar agreements. To this end, talks were initiated in October 2020 between Greece and Albania for the conclusion of a special agreement, an agreement that will bring their maritime delimitation issues before the International Court of Justice. The implementation of the provision of UNCLOS entails the exercise by Greece of its sovereign rights, sovereignty and jurisdiction in accordance with the Convention in its maritime zones. This includes the recently proclaimed Greek exclusive economic zone based on the Greek-Egyptian delimitation agreement. Furthermore, Greece has recently extended its territorial sea from 6 to 12 nautical miles in the Ionian Sea in western Greece. And it reserves, of course, its right to extend the territorial waters to other parts of the territory as well. It has also proceeded to the closure of bays and the drawing of straight baselines in the same region in accordance with the relevant provisions of UNCLOS. Ladies and gentlemen, challenging the implementation of UNCLOS in the Eastern Mediterranean seriously affects peace and security in our region. This is demonstrated by the conduct of our neighbor, Turkey. Turkey refuses to adhere to UNCLOS as it does not recognize that islands are entitled to maritime zones. Neither it recognizes our rights stemming from UNCLOS to extend our territorial waters. To this end, Turkey even threatened Greece with war should Greece decide to extend its territorial sea beyond 6 nautical miles according to UNCLOS. The casus belli, as it is called, was proclaimed by the Turkish National Assembly in 1995. This stance on the part of Turkey is contrary to the United Nations Charter and a blatant example of contravention of international law. It violates the fundamental principles of refraining from the threat of use of force and the peaceful resolution of disputes among nations. Moreover, it goes against the basic principles on which NATO is founded. Withdrawing the threat is a necessary prerequisite for a substantial improvement in Greek-Turkish relations. Furthermore, Turkey's illegal conduct in the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean includes violation of Greek territorial waters and Greece's national airspace, as well as challenging Greece's sovereignty on a number of islands ceded to Greece by related international treaties. This conduct is paired with the exceptionist blue homeland, Mavi Vatan, theory of Turkey, a theory claiming extended maritime areas in the Aegean Sea and in the Eastern Mediterranean, which belongs to its neighbors. UNCLOS, which also reflects customary law, clearly provides that the islands, regardless of their size, have full entitlement to a continental shelf and an exclusive economic zone as any other land territory. The signing of the so-called Memorandum of Understanding between Turkey and the Provisional Government of National Accord of Libya on maritime delimitation in the Eastern Mediterranean is a flagrant case of contravention to these rules of the law of the sea. Delimitation, according to UNCLOS, takes place only between states with opposite or adjacent coasts. Nevertheless, Turkey and Libya are not states with opposite or adjacent coasts. They have no common boundaries. The provision of this illegal Memorandum of Understanding deprived Greek islands, including the island of Crete. Crete is the 5th largest island in the Mediterranean with a population of 600,000, of their maritime zones beyond the 6 nautical miles. It is obvious that such an action contravenes any sense of geography, logic, or maritime delimitation. Greece constantly declares its willingness to negotiate with Turkey the resolution of its outstanding difference, namely the delimitation of the continental shelf and the exclusive economic zone in accordance always with international law and specifically the law of the sea. And failing an agreement bilaterally to submit our difference to the court. Ladies and gentlemen, Greece has developed a dynamic approach in promoting international law and in particular UNCLOS in international relations. It has enhanced its relations, it has established partnerships on a bilateral, regional and international level. This approach contributes to peace and stability in the Aegean Sea, in the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond that. Needless to say, I will be extremely happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Then you can, please take a seat, and you can sit in the middle. And then I will ask Tore Henriksen, invite you to also sit there. Maybe you can sit on the far right, and I can try and sit here. Before we open the floor for Q&A, thank you so much for inviting to that. Let me also bring in and ask Tore Henriksen. I know you're not an expert on the Eastern Mediterranean, and you asked kindly not to discuss that topic, but maybe you can reflect make a few remarks on what is, and we heard it from the minister, what UNCLOS means for Greek policy and foreign policy. Can you say a few words about how this is seen in Norway, and also maybe add a few things about some of the maritime delimitation processes that we have had in Norway?
Thank you. As you mentioned in your introduction, Norway is one of the states that has profited mostly from developments in the law of the sea. Approximately 5 to 6 times our landmass is waters under Norwegian jurisdiction or sovereign rights. And of course, Norway is also a maritime country, similar to Greek. So the law of the sea has been and is an important issue. And as a small country, I know that the rule of law, and particularly on the ocean, is essential to Norway. As Norway established already in the mid-70s, before the UNCLOS was adopted, its EEZ. And of course, it meant overlapping claims with a lot of its neighboring countries. But Norway has, as far as I can remember, entered into agreements with all of its neighboring states, settled its boundaries mostly by agreements, with 1 or 2 exceptions. It's with Sweden some 100 years ago, and the 1993 dispute with Jan Mayen with Denmark, which where the court applied this disproportionate in length of coastlines. So, and as you mentioned, the longest dispute has been with the Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation. But it's important to note that Norway and Russia, throughout the 40 years almost, had a very nice, good collaboration on the most important resource of the waters. It was the fish stocks. Already in the mid-70s, they established a joint Norwegian Fisheries Commission, and I think that is perhaps an idea. Even if you disagree on things, you need to collaborate on some common issues, for instance, the protection of the environment, conservation of shared resources, and also under the UNCLOS, and I think also under international law, states are, even if they disagree on delimitation, they are to try to make agreements on how to deal with each other until they can reach an agreement. And that was done in Barents Sea with the Grey Zone Agreement that was established in the late 70s, when Norway and Russia agreed to manage a disputed area in a very nice way. So, as you mentioned, in 2010, they finally agreed on a settlement on a single delimitation from the Drangerfjord out into the Arctic Ocean. There are some, I think, a small part that are not settled because they are awaiting the decision of the Commission on the Limits of the Outer Continental Shelf on the Russian submission. And of course, Norway and Russia had different opinions on how this ocean should be shared. Norway stands proponent of the equidistance principle and saying that there was no reason to deviate from it, whereas the Russians focused on the sector line that's following the the longitude from the coast up to the North Pole, and which was based on a decree from the 1920s, and arguing for different types of arguments you use in delimitation, both geographically, but also security issues and so on. But in the end, they share the disputed area in two. And when you read, and of course it's very difficult to read from the agreement how international law had affected the agreement, but you can see from the declaration of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs that, of course, the basis, the legitimacy of the agreement was international law. But the only thing they mention is that the disparity in coastlines. So, of course, the Russian relatively part was longer than the Norwegian, but in addition, they refer to the negotiation. So I think, of course, law inspires and gives arguments to the parties, but in the end, there are other factors also that comes into play. For instance, Norway interested in developing this area for petroleum activities, because under international law, I think the argument is that states should refrain from taking action in a disputed area that can disrupt the dispute. So neither of the parties had started any actions. So that, of course, I think was very important. And I know that in Russia there was some opposition, particularly in the fishing industry, that felt that this agreement was unfair. So I think that was a compromise based on the need to resolve issues. And of course Norway and Russia, despite the recent years, the Cold War, etc., have had friendly relationships. But at the end, if you compare the different delimitations Norway have done, I think in some examples it's the equidistance principle, but for instance with Iceland, the Icelanders got a full EEZ, so there Norway were very nice, and in other areas there was sort of a compromise. So I think each dispute has its own story, kind of, and of course depending on the states involved as well.
Foreign Minister, you told a story about how Greece has found arrangements with Albania, with Italy, with Egypt, but that you're left with some real big difficulties with Turkey. Would you say that Turkey is the only outstanding issue now for you?
Well, it may not be the only outstanding issue, but it's clearly the most difficult outstanding issue.
Yeah.
So I would say that if in some sort of magical way we resolve the differences with Turkey, I think all the other issues of the delimitation in the Eastern Mediterranean will fall into place.
Yeah, and then the question is, what are then the key issues of contestation, as you would say? It was going to help to inform some people here who are not the experts. If you look at the map, and a part of the thing is, of course, the beautiful Greek islands that are. So it's. I think for Norway it's a bit different because it's about some fish swimming far away, but here is people living on islands that have huge kind of close geographic proximity. So, but what are some of the key issues that you think are creating difficulty? Is it the legal principles of the fundamental approach to it, or is it possible to compartmentalize, to say, okay, here we can reach an agreement, this is outstanding, this is difficult?
Well, no, it believe me, although it may sound naive, and I have to admit, maybe I was naive when I was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs by Prime Minister Mitsotakis, but I thought that in the end of the day it's simple and can be resolved. And why is that? Because when you have to solve a problem, as an exercise in geometry, the first thing you have to do is set the rules. How do we approach this? What set of rules do we apply? And if we agree in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean that the rules of the game is UNCLOS, the International Law of the Sea, then we apply UNCLOS and we see that comes out of that. And if what comes out of that creates a disagreement, there's a court there that resolves the difference, and that's Hague. So, for example, if that was a difference between Greece and Norway, for example, I think it would be extremely easy to resolve it. And why not? And if you allow me to say, look at the dynamics that can be created out of the resolution of these differences. So there would be cooperation, trade. I mean, we're quite friendly towards each other. We have similar cuisine. So we could create a huge dynamic. But unfortunately, you cannot resolve an exercise if you are following different rules. For example, geometry in school. All of us have been to school. Now, all of us have been taught in school the Euclidean geometry, in which parallels exist. Now, if we try to solve a geometry exercise and together, and I'm using Euclidean geometry in which parallels exist, and you are using paralleliptical geometry in which parallels do not exist, we will never solve the exercise. There's no way we can talk to each other. We're using different codes with different meanings. So our proposal to Turkey is very simple. First of all, sign up to the UNCLOS. Forget about things of the 18th, the 17th, the 19th century, threat of casus belli, threat of war. This is, excuse my plain wording, this is nonsense. Turkey is the only country in the world that has issued a threat of war against another country for essentially what is a legal point. So forget about that. And if we still have differences, let's go to The Hague and resolve it. And I think it's as simple as that. But of course, that means that you accept the kind of correlation between states and nations that are 21st century or late 20th century approach. If you see yourself as a local super hegemon, which should impose your will upon others, then that's a different story.
Yeah. You also you also have the map, and you mentioned also the Turkish Libya agreement. And can I ask you to demonstrate? Because I think it puts kind of illustrates a bit of the problem, and I guess the ambassador from Turkey would also ask to join in on the discussion here afterwards. But could you just show it, because it illustrates some of the difficulties?
I'll tell you, because I have negotiated those agreements I mentioned before, and I have signed them. I'll show you just one map. I will not. This is between the two red lines and with this blue line here is the delimitation agreement between the partial delimitation agreement between Greece and Egypt, which could be an example. Professor, you could use it as an example when you teach your students, because it's an example of the implementation of UNCLOS. Now, if you look at the dotted lines, this is the Turkish-Libyan agreement. Of course, this so-called agreement, which is a memorandum of understanding, was signed by the Libyan administration of Sarraj when Marshal Haftar was threatening Tripoli, and they were in terrible need of Turkish military help, so they could sign whatever. I mean, Libya at the time could sign a delimitation with Singapore. It would be easy for them and just delimit Africa, whatever. But this thing has if you see it, has a rather small problem. It disregards the existence of all the Greek islands which exist there. And I'll show you what that means in practical terms. This map is this map. No, well, it does go as far as Sicily, but yeah. So there's a blue dot here. This blue dot is 6.5 miles from the island of Crete. For those who do not know Crete, although in Norway there are not many, I'll repeat that Crete is apart from being a magnificent tourist destination, is the 5th biggest island in the Mediterranean, and it's home to more than 600,000 people in the winter and more than 1.5 million in the summer. Now, there's a blue dot there. What does the blue dot represent? Well, that was an Italian vessel doing research work under instruction from a Greek, Israeli, Cypriot conglomerate. And this research vessel, this Italian research vessel, was hailed by a Turkish frigate saying that 6.5 miles out of Crete, it violates Turkey's sovereign rights. So you see, sometimes, if you start from an unlawful and unreasonable point of addressing things, where you end up is, almost, how can I characterize that? So it would have been funny if it would not have been so unlawful again and so much against common sense. And yet again, Turkey proclaims that this is legality.
But picking up on what Tore Henriksen said, he indicated that one of the reasons why Russia and Norway at that particular moment in time could sign an agreement, and I think many people would say that maybe that could not have been signed today, but it was signed in 2010 and 11, and part of the basis for that was that there was this idea that there was joint resources underneath, and that the extraction of natural resources, oil and gas, could also drive some kind of cooperation.
Oh.
A contrasting image is that, okay, if we have some natural resources, that will intensify the competition. So, if you understand.
Yes, I do.
Right. So, do you see any possibilities? Do you see that, let's say, the prosperity and the richness in the energy resources in the region is making these things more difficult to solve, or you think that it makes it more easy to solve? Obviously, there are benefits for all parties to find a solution.
Well, I'll make it easier for you. The Mitsotakis government in Greece is a green government, although we're conservatives. And we have clearly stated that we're not going to extend the program of research for hydrocarbons in the Aegean or in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have issued some licenses. They're not in the areas we're talking about. But apart from that, we're not wished to continue this research. And why is that? Let me be frank. It's very simple. We believe that the era of hydrocarbons is beyond us. Although it's difficult to say that when the price of oil is almost at $100 per barrel. But yet again, if we start the research now, it needs 20 years to mature that. And we believe that by that time, it would be irrelevant. Irrelevant even if it exists, which we don't know, and even cost-wise it could make sense to extract it. So for us, this land and this sea has nothing to do with hydrocarbons. And allow me a personal remark. Many of you know the Aegean, and Aegean is a paradise on earth. And with all due respect, we're not going to turn it in our lifetime in the Gulf of Mexico. So,
okay, excellent. Okay, then we open up the floor for questions. Anybody interested? Want to take the floor? Ambassador, please keep remarks short and focused. Please, Ambassador.
Okay. Thank
Ambassador of Turkey.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure always to see someone from across the Aegean Sea.
thank you for being here, Ambassador.
It is my pleasure. Of course, what I heard is not very pleasant coming from your...
I thought so.
Yeah, but of course, it's not me to counter all of your arguments. You have a counterpart back in Ankara that would be very happy to discuss all these issues with you. And here in Norway, in Oslo, we are not in a position to solve Turkish-Greek issues. But since you came here and told about these to the audience, I would like to point out a couple of pertinent issues with what you have said, Excellency, respectfully. You are claiming, or you are actually saying that Turkey is doing this and that, but you are missing one point, that all of these actions are in response to something you have been doing. So these are consequences. The Turkish-Libyan agreement was also a consequence of something that you also know very well. And the Casus Belli declaration by the Turkish Grand National Assembly was also a consequence that Greece was telling that they will go ahead unilaterally declaring the continental waters as 12 miles, and this would practically lock Turkish waters, Turkish ability to reach international waters, and Turkey will be locked into its own territorial waters. That is what you are imposing, or you are trying to tell Turkey. The UNCLOS, during the negotiations of UNCLOS, Turkey was a persistent objector to the notion of the islands having exactly the same effect on the delimitation, because in the Aegean case, it is impossible for us to accept this. Aegean Sea is a very specific case, and as you were telling that one side of the sea should be able to look at the other side, and delimitation can be done only by the two. So in case of Turkish-Greek issues in the Aegean and all other issues, Turkey is in desire of making it through dialogue, solving it through dialogue. And I was very happy to note that next week probably there will be a new chapter of talks, consultative talks between Turkey and Greece at the deputy ministers level. And we are actually looking forward to solve all of these issues through dialogue. Aegean Sea has two sides. There is a landmass on the other side that you are forgetting. That is called Asia Minor. You may remember it from the history. And it is the landmass of Asian continent that you would like to totally ignore. My island, and it has the same effect, cutoff effect in the delimitation as the landmass of Turkey. So this is, of course, impossible for us to accept, and that is the starting point. You were telling that you are ready to talk to Turkey on the basis of UNCLOS, and Turkey didn't join UNCLOS because we cannot accept the situation in the Aegean as the solution. So we are not able to have this dialogue on the basis of UNCLOS only. As Professor was saying, international law can be one of the basis of solutions, and the others are fairness, equality, and mutual rights. If you are ready to accept or to take into account Turkish issues, Turkish rights, and Turkish needs in this matter, we can always talk and sit and talk and solve these problems. That is what. And you also failed to mention about the demilitarized status of some of the islands that Ulf mentioned. That is also one of the issues that we would like to discuss when it is about the international law and application of it. I think according to the international law, agreements are part of international law, direct agreements, and Lausanne Treaty and the 1947 Paris Treaty asks you not to militarize some of its islands, which is not accepted. So there are many others, but this is just as a beginning.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. Minister, would you like to respond briefly? So in some sense, an invitation to talk?
I will.
But on the conditions of what?
First of all, I would like to thank the Ambassador for being, I said it before, for being here today. Of course, there's no question. So directly, it was another statement. But in a way, Ambassador, I would also like to thank you for verifying exactly what I said. Because in the essence, if you allow me to repeat, you said that it's legitimate for Turkey to issue a casus belli against us, a threat of war. If well, being a diplomat, I take it that interrupting is not within your rules of conduct. Now, I start again. You say openly to an audience, and luckily also you are in the internet, that threatening with war any country is legitimate. But if I remember well from what I was taught in university, but also if I remember well, you have subscribed to the United Nations Charter. And if you allow me my memory to serve me well, that totally prohibits the use of force and the threat of the use of force. So if you allow me to ask not you, but Turkey, because it's not a personal issue, isn't the casus belli exactly what is prohibited by the United Nations Charter? Does the United Nations Charter condition this prohibition upon your interpretation of what Greece said it would do, according to what? To an international convention which 168 parties have subscribed to, with the proud exception of Turkey? Even the United States, who has not ratified the UNCLOS, is advising every country in the world to subscribe to the UNCLOS. And here comes Turkey, which says, because I didn't subscribe to the UNCLOS, you are not allowed to implement UNCLOS, and if you do implement UNCLOS, it's a threat of war against you, and that's that, because that's what I want. Is that a reasonable conduct of doing things in the 21st century? Is that really an invitation to a dialogue, or it is a pure threat? And I could use much harder words than a pure threat. So, the truth is that the difference between Greece and Turkey are solvable under one precondition, that Turkey comes to the 21st century. If Turkey stays in the 19th century, if Turkey stays in the way that Suleiman the Magnificent was conducting affairs, by having the armadas around the Mediterranean, then this is a no-go. It's a no-go. But in my humble opinion, there is the possibility that Turkey will change its ways and its understanding, because I deeply believe that this is to the benefit of the Turkish society. And if I'm allowed to repeat myself, there is a huge dynamic that would exist if this issue has been resolved. And by the way, last remark. The ambassador said that the Turkish-Libyan memorandum was a reaction to something. What was that something was not revealed to us. But again, the question is, how can any illegitimate reaction could be acceptable? I mean, is the real answer to that would have been, no, you're wrong. The Turkish-Libyan memorandum is a legal agreement. I heard that it's a reaction to something, but yet again, nobody on this earth can defend this agreement on legal grounds. The legal point is exactly the same as if Turkey has delimited with Singapore, or by the way with Brazil, or with Patagonia or whatever. How can that stand in today's world? Thank you.
Okay, thank you also. Now Osman is there with a difficult question from somebody out there watching from a distance. So we don't know. There will be a surprise here now.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We have one question from our digital audience, which is on a very different direction. So, and he writes, a warm welcome to the Minister. Do the difficulties with Turkey affect international investment projects for renewable energy in the Aegean? And what are the mitigation efforts for this?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, for Greece, renewables is something we very much look forward to. We believe in green energy, and I said that before. But I have to say that up to now, I have not seen the existing situation and prohibiting something. So my answer to the question is no up to that point.
Could I ask a question? Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Pernille Riker.
Oh,
from
yes,
NUPI.
yeah, thank you. Pernille Riker, research professor here at NUPI. I know this is a difficult conflict or topic, and I will not kind of try to go between you, but I just wanted to, I mean, this is difficult also because both Turkey and Greece are members of NATO. France is a strong supporter of UNCLOS and has supported Greece. And the EU is also a strong supporter of international law in general and also on UNCLOS. And I just wonder, how do you perceive the role of the European Union and the European Commission in this?
Thank you for asking me, but I have to say that this is easy for me. Both France and
This is easy?
Yes, it's easy. Why? Because, first of all, both France and the European Union per se, as an entity, have subscribed to the UNCLOS. I mean, UNCLOS is the law of the sea. It's not one of the options. It's the law. Okay. Now, second, the European Union is our family. We're a proud member. It's our family. So, I'm once a month participating in the Council of Ministers and discussing these issues. My position to my colleagues is the following. Look, this is the situation. If you think I'm wrong, please let me know. If you think that whatever Greece says, if there's something we're doing wrong or what we're saying wrong, please let us know. I haven't seen anybody coming forward, because our position is clearly a position based on the UNCLOS. There may be discussions on the European Union, how do we react to Turkey's behavior? That's a different thing. But on the Greek basis, there's not a counter-argument. And I'm sorry to say it cannot be, because it's the exact position of the UNCLOS to which the European Union is a proud member, and France as well, as you were kind enough to mention. So thank you.
Henriksen, I know that you don't want to really enter into this, but can I ask you, just as a lay person myself, you hear the arguments that, okay, so any solution have to be based on UNCLOS, and one of the frustrating points is that Turkey is not recognizing that, and so there's basically so we are in a no, so almost no possibilities, as we heard. And then you also said that UNCLOS, in some sense, of course, has a set of principles, but it's possible to take into account some different concerns, to find different principles, kind of pragmatic approaches somehow to find solutions. So how do you see this? Do you see it as a unsolvable issue? As a professor looking at it, or do you see that there might be some elements in the interpretation of the law that could pave a ground for a solution? No, I'm not asking you now.
You're a professor.
I'm asking the professor.
Okay,
yeah, because right.
Of course, there is always a solution, but of course it has to be willingness on both parties. But what I wanted to say is that UNCLOS, you refer to UNCLOS, but UNCLOS is, of course, setting out the basic rules for the law of the sea, but UNCLOS also leaves a lot of leeway to state practice, also to international courts. For instance, the rules on delimitation of the EEZ and continental shelf, there the states were not able to agree on the principles, so they left it to the court. So a lot of the principles on to achieve equitable solution is developed through International Court of Justice, or now in recent years of the tribunal in Hamburg, and there you have several principles that can be used by the parties here. And of course these will be also applicable to Turkey, because these are principles that are part of general international law. And also, as you say, that the states you are required under international law to resolve your disputes in a peaceful way and try to find in the meantime some ways to live with each other without provoking each other. So that could be the first step, to try to find out some preliminary solutions, kind of to freeze the situation and then try to find a common ground. And there are principles also on how islands the status of islands and how they should be used in a delimitation. There are cases from Nicaragua, Colombia, from the dispute between UK and France on the Scilly Islands. So there are some factors that can be taken into account, and which I think could serve both Greece and Turkey and find. And I guess the solution, you would not be happy with the solution, either of you, but in the end, I think, and I forgot to say it, for Norway, or to settle its boundaries, it's also a very good thing because it creates clarity and predictability for the industry, for your fishermen, for your navy, etc. So having clear and agreed boundaries is a very positive thing, and I think that is something one misses in the end. And perhaps, even if you have to give something, you are not very happy with it in the end. The total sum, the plus sum, is bigger than the loss you had, and you perhaps in 50 years you forget that.
I guess this is all carefully studied in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Greece as well. So.
Well, it is. I have to say, this is in a different, more complex, more, or let's say, educational way, repeating something that for us is a common and position. I'm not asking Turkey just to implement the UNCLOS and accept the result. I'm not doing that. What we are saying as a country is we could have differences. Let's agree on the rules, and if we don't come to a final conclusion on a bilateral level, let's go to the court. And the court could establish, the way in which could. And of course, in the end of the day, if you go to the court, you don't get 100% of what you expect to get. I mean, that's fine. But we have accepted to go to the court from the very beginning. We're not asking to impose the UNCLOS upon Turkey as it is. But we have to agree that UNCLOS is the name of the game. If we don't agree, let's say, if we have the Turkish-Libyan memorandum, what would the court say on the Turkish-Libyan memorandum? I mean, the judge will look at it, will return, so what the hell are you bringing here to us to judge? And we give it back to us. So we agree the rules, and we try bilaterally. If we can't find a way, we go to the court, we have a decision, and I couldn't agree more. Again, I said it twice, I will say it a third time. That could create an explosion of dynamic in the region and a huge kind of goodwill.
We have one more question. Could you keep it short and please present yourself?
Yes, very shortly. My name is Panagiotis Pavlos, University of Oslo and the University of Cambridge. I'm a philosopher, so I have to say so. I'm not a specialist with the issue in discussion, but I have a question since I like mind games. Suppose, our dear minister, that we reach an agreement with Turkey either ways, or via an international court or a direct agreement. And suppose that we have a delimitation of the maritime zones based again either ways. Would you feel comfortable, or would you be still concerned after such an agreement, given that the basic problems between Greece and Turkey, and that's something that Norwegian people perhaps do not know, because Norway had been under Danish occupation for 4 centuries, but has nothing to do with Ottoman occupation. So would you feel still concerned, given that we had Lausanne, and then after Lausanne Treaty, we had the damage of the Greek minority in Constantinople, which was anticipated to be protected by a treaty. So in brief, to what extent even an agreement, and a signed agreement with Turkey, would give us a nice sleep next night? Thank you very much. And thank you for being here. It's a great honor to have you.
Well, it is, well, but what can I say? It is, for me, I'm a born optimist. I'm a born optimist. And I believe that I believe that our difference with Turkey is this difference, this delimitation. And if this is resolved, a huge dynamic between our two peoples will become apparent. And I'll tell you of one example which touched me personally a lot. No, I was in Istanbul, in Constantinople, on a personal visit just 2 years ago. And I went around the city, And as a Greek, I love coffee. So I went to cafes here and there, with lots of people. Never, ever, a Turkish cafe owner allowed me to pay for my coffee. And that says something about the psychology of the Turkish society towards us, and I will never forget it. I mean, I felt terribly at home and not threatened for 1 second, not one thing said against me as I was walking with my kid and my wife around the city. So there is a dynamic there that we can build upon if this thing gets out of the way.
Thank you so much. We have 2 minutes left. It's a privilege to have you here, and it's a bit of a segue from what you said. You said having the border delimitation then doesn't mean that all problems are disappearing. And I thought, since you are here, maybe could you say a few words about how you in Greece now view the situation in Ukraine? It's a very different topic, but since you're here, I guess you have talked to the Norwegian Foreign Minister on this. So could you also...
during the last question, the last question mentioned having a night's sleep tonight. And now you show me, I didn't answer immediately because I was thinking what kind of nice sleep I would have tonight. I'm flying to Moscow tomorrow. Yeah. So it is... and for me, this trip is very important. And really, I'm not going to sleep that well tonight. Why? First of all, we have a Greek minority exactly on the line of contact. Mariupol, which is a 400,000 people city, is by 1/4 a Greek city. And so, if we don't see de-escalation and we see escalation of this crisis, first of all, this would affect profoundly the Greeks, which are exactly on the region, on the critical region. And just yesterday, one Greek died because he was shot by an Ukrainian soldier in an unrelated incident, but yet again it shows what's happening there. And in 2014, 14 Greeks died because there was a funeral and they were taken as a military unit. And a bomb exploded right on them. So, de-escalation for us is extremely important, especially for the Greek community. Now I'm wearing my European Union NATO hat. I mean, for us, this kind of threat, invasion, etc., does not belong to the 21st century, as I was saying before. We don't have different criteria. For us, territorial integrity, sovereign rights, the United Nations Charter is the Holy Gospel. And we don't have two standards. So for us, whatever different it is can be resolved through diplomatic ways. And that is what I'm going to repeat to Sergei Lavrov, whom I greatly respect and who is a very experienced diplomat. He does not want to hear from me, but I would like to add our voice. We know of our weight. We don't punch up our weight. We're a small country. But I would like to add our word on all the others who preach for diplomatic resolution, for respect of territorial integrity, for respect of international law. And as I'm a born optimist, as I said before, I believe in the end of the day that reason would prevail. And invasion, it's not something that somebody would contemplate in 2022.
Okay, thank you so much, Minister, for being here, taking your time. I know you have a busy schedule, and now you have to prepare for your speech tomorrow, so I don't want to take that time from you. For very important. And thank you so much, Tore, for being here, and to all of you for coming, and for the first time for a very long time having a seminar with people in the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.